Towering, territorial, and terrifyingly fast, grizzly bears are nature's ultimate test of survival. With bite force strong enough to crush bone and claws that rip through bark like paper, a face-off with one isn't a fight. It's a reckoning. They don't bluff, and when they charge, hesitation kills. From remote hunts that turned bloody to shocking home encounters deep in bear country, this video unpacks 6 real-life grizzly bear attacks in which survival came down to instinct, grit, and sheer luck. Each story is a brutal reminder that the wild doesn't give second chances. The remote wilderness of a national park in south-central Alaska has long been renowned for its untamed beauty and formidable wildlife. In 2003, this pristine landscape became the setting for one of the most harrowing bear encounters ever documented. Established in 1980, the park encompasses over 13 million acres of rugged terrain, making it the largest national park in the United States and a prime habitat for North America's most imposing predator, the Alaskan grizzly bear. Thaddeus Montgomery Blackwood, a seasoned hunter with 27 years of wilderness experience, had ventured into the park's northern region for a week-long hunting expedition. Blackwood had obtained all necessary permits and was well prepared, carrying a high-caliber Remington rifle, proper supplies, and decades of accumulated knowledge about wilderness survival. His primary objective was to harvest illegal moose, a mission that required him to navigate deep into territories few humans ever traversed. On the third morning of his expedition, Blackwood was tracking moose signs along a riverbed when the crisp autumn air carried an unmistakable scent, the musky odor of a grizzly bear. Before he could retreat to safer ground, the undergrowth erupted with movement as an enormous female grizzly burst forth, her 2 cubs visible briefly behind her. The sow, weighing approximately 800 pounds with a distinctive cream-colored patch on her shoulder, charged toward Blackwood with terrifying speed and determination. Blackwood later reported that he had only seconds to react. His first shot struck the grizzly's right shoulder, the heavy-caliber round tearing through muscle but failing to stop her advance. The bear continued her charge, covering ground with alarming speed. His second and third shots hit her side and neck, respectively, drawing blood but seemingly having little effect on her momentum. The maternal instinct to protect her cubs had transformed the powerful creature into a nearly unstoppable force. As the distance closed to less than 20 yards, Blackwood fired shots 4, 5, and 6 in rapid succession. These rounds struck the grizzly's chest, and for a moment her pace faltered. Yet remarkably, fueled by adrenaline and maternal fury, she continued her relentless approach. Blood matted her fur, but her eyes remained fixed on the perceived threat to her young. Blackwood, maintaining extraordinary composure in the face of imminent death, methodically fired his 7th and 8th rounds. The 8th shot struck the bear's lower jaw, causing her to shake her massive head, but not deterring her advance. The 9th round hit her upper chest, finally causing her to stagger significantly. With only 1 round remaining in his magazine, Blackwood took careful aim and delivered the 10th and final shot to the base of the bear's throat. The cumulative damage and blood loss finally overcame even the bear's tremendous will. She collapsed just 12 feet from where Blackwood stood, her massive body sliding to a halt on the rocky ground. The aftermath revealed the true scale of the encounter. Wildlife officials who investigated the incident confirmed that the female grizzly was one of the largest recorded in the region in decades. The bear's determination to continue charging, despite sustaining multiple normally fatal wounds, astounded even veteran park rangers. Examination revealed that Blackwood's shots had been well placed. Any one of several could have eventually been fatal, but the bear's extraordinary physiology and maternal protective instinct had allowed her to continue her attack far beyond normal physiological limits. Blackwood's ordeal wasn't over after the bear fell. He still faced the challenge of ensuring the orphaned cubs would be found and rescued by wildlife officials. He marked the location carefully and hiked 17 miles to reach a ranger station, where he reported the incident in full detail. Fish and wildlife officers later located the cubs and transported them to a wildlife rehabilitation facility. The incident transformed Blackwood's perspective on wilderness and wildlife. Though he had acted in legitimate self-defense, the encounter left him with profound respect for the grizzly's power and tenacity. Subsequently, he advocated for bear conservation and wilderness protection, establishing the Blackwood Foundation for Wilderness Safety Education, which taught hunters and hikers how to avoid bear confrontations. This remarkable encounter served as a sobering reminder of nature's raw power. The story of the grizzly that absorbed 10 rounds before succumbing became legendary among Alaskan guides and wildlife officials, not as a tale of hunting prowess, but as a testament to the extraordinary will of one of nature's most formidable creatures protecting her young. After the harrowing incident, Blackwood never returned to hunting. The experience marked a turning point in his life, shifting his perspective on nature and its apex predators. Instead of continuing the hunter's path, he chose a new mission: educating others respectfully and safely coexisting with the North's most formidable wildlife. Through workshops, documentaries, and community outreach, Blackwood became a passionate advocate for non-lethal wildlife management, proving that understanding and coexistence could replace fear and force. America's dense forests surrounding Crater Lake in southern Oregon had long been home to diverse wildlife, including a healthy population of black bears. In 1995, these ancient woodlands, known for their towering pines and rich understory vegetation, became the setting for a terrifying encounter that would forever change how residents viewed their forest neighbors. The area had historically been a peaceful coexistence between humans and wildlife, with bear sightings common but confrontations rare. Zachariah Everett Wellington, a local carpenter and recreational hiker, had been exploring these woods for over a decade without incident. That crisp autumn morning, he had set out with his 3-year-old border collie, Pepper, for what was intended to be a routine 6-mile hike along the lesser-traveled eastern ridges. Wellington was well-versed in wilderness safety, carrying bear spray and maintaining awareness of his surroundings as he traversed the familiar terrain. Approximately 4 miles into his journey, where the trail narrowed between a rocky outcropping and dense thicket, Wellington and Pepper suddenly found themselves face to face with an enormous male black bear. The animal, later estimated to weigh nearly 400 pounds, stood directly in their path approximately 30 feet ahead. Wildlife officials later determined that recent forest fires to the north likely displaced this bear from its usual territory. The encounter quickly escalated from tense to life-threatening. The bear's eyes locked onto Wellington, who immediately recognized the signs of an agitated bear: ears flattened back, head lowered, and a distinctive swaying motion. Wellington froze, his heart racing as he mentally reviewed the proper protocols for bear encounters. Pepper, however, instinctively moved between his owner and the perceived threat, barking fiercely despite being dramatically outsized. The bear responded with a deep rumbling growl that Wellington later described as feeling like it vibrated through the forest floor. What happened next defied the conventional wisdom that black bears typically avoid confrontation. Rather than retreating, the bear advanced slowly, mouth slightly open, revealing formidable canines. Wellington gripped his hiking stick tightly, simultaneously attempting to control Pepper with his other hand while preparing for defense. The bear suddenly charged without warning, not at the dog as Wellington expected, but directly at him. In the split-second struggle that followed, Pepper demonstrated extraordinary courage, lunging forward and managing to bite the bear's sensitive snout. The unexpected counterattack caused the bear to momentarily back away, blood visible on its muzzle. Wellington seized the opportunity to back slowly toward a cluster of trees, never turning his back on the increasingly aggressive animal. The bear, however, was far from deterred. It circled, approaching from a different angle, clearly intent on removing what it perceived as intruders in its claimed territory. For nearly 20 minutes, an extraordinary standoff ensued. Wellington alternated between making himself appear larger by raising his arms and his hiking stick, shouting in a deep, authoritative voice, and preparing to defend himself should the bear charge again. Pepper maintained a protective stance, growling continuously despite being outmatched. The bear made 2 more abbreviated charges, each time stopping short as Wellington stood his ground and Pepper barked ferociously. During the final approach, the bear came within 6 feet, close enough that Wellington could smell its musty odor and see the scars that marked its face and shoulders. Wellington swung his hiking stick forcefully, striking the bear across the muzzle and momentarily stunning it. This final confrontation convinced the bear that the potential meal wasn't worthwhile. With a final huff and series of grunts, it turned and disappeared into the underbrush, occasionally looking back as it retreated. Wellington, shaking from adrenaline and exertion, waited nearly 30 minutes before cautiously proceeding back the way he had come, frequently checking behind him. He emerged from the trail with minor scratches and bruises from stumbling during the encounter, but otherwise physically unharmed. The psychological impact, however, would prove more lasting. In the aftermath, fish and wildlife officials investigated the incident, confirming from Wellington's detailed description and physical evidence that the encounter had been with an unusually aggressive black bear, possibly one habituated to human food sources. The area was temporarily closed to hikers while officials attempted to locate and potentially relocate the bear, though it was never found. Wellington's experience fundamentally altered his relationship with the wilderness he had loved. While he eventually returned to hiking, he never again ventured out alone and became an advocate for wilderness safety education in local schools and community centers. His account became a regional wildlife management training case study, highlighting how even typically non-confrontational species can behave unpredictably when environmental factors disrupt their normal patterns. Pepper received local recognition for her bravery, was featured in the regional newspaper, and was honored by the county's outdoor recreation department. The Border Collie remained Wellington's faithful hiking companion for another 9 years. During that time, her owner often remarked that he owed his life to her protective instinct and unwavering courage during those terrifying minutes when human and predator locked eyes in a battle of wills. The remote valleys of a national park in northwestern Montana had long been revered for their pristine beauty and abundant wildlife. In 1987, one of these secluded valleys became the site of a tragic encounter that would forever alter how park officials approached visitor education about bear safety. The park, established in 1910, encompassed over 1 million acres of wilderness and served as critical habitat for one of the largest grizzly bear populations in the continental United States. Bartholomew Reginald Thornton and his 19-year-old son, Donovan Maxwell Thornton, had embarked on what was planned as a 3-day backcountry hiking adventure through the park's less-traveled eastern regions. The elder Thornton, a financial analyst from Minneapolis, had moderate outdoor experience, having visited various national parks over the years, though this was his first venture into recognized grizzly territory. His son, an aspiring wildlife photographer and college sophomore, had convinced his father to take this trip to capture images of the park's legendary landscapes and wildlife. On the second day of their expedition, the Thorntons spotted a massive male grizzly approximately 100 yards away while traversing a narrow valley floor near a small tributary stream. The bear, later estimated to weigh nearly 700 pounds, was feeding on berries near the water's edge, unaware of their presence. Park records would later confirm that this particular valley had experienced an unusually productive berry season, attracting higher than normal concentrations of bears. The elder Thornton immediately recognized the danger and quietly instructed his son to slowly back away. Donovan, however, was captivated by the rare photographic opportunity. Despite his father's increasingly urgent warnings, the young man moved closer, removing his telephoto lens from his backpack and preparing his camera. Park investigators later found 32 images on Donovan's recovered camera, documenting his gradual approach toward the feeding grizzly. What happened next occurred with terrifying swiftness. The grizzly suddenly became aware of Donovan's presence when he was approximately 50 yards away, raised its massive head, and instantly shifted from passive foraging to aggressive defense of its feeding area. Wildlife biologists later explained that the bear likely perceived the approaching human as threatening its critical pre-hibernation feeding. Without the huffing or bluff charges that sometimes precede attacks, the grizzly launched into a full charge. Moving with astonishing speed for an animal of its size, it covered the distance to Donovan in seconds. Finally realizing his peril, the younger Thornton attempted to retreat, but tripped on uneven ground. His father, watching in horror from further back on the trail, began shouting and desperately throwing rocks in an attempt to distract the bear from his fallen son. The grizzly reached Donovan before he could regain his footing. What followed was a brutal and devastating attack. The bear inflicted catastrophic injuries with its powerful jaws and 5-inch claws. According to the elder Thornton's subsequent account to park rangers, the attack lasted approximately 45 seconds, though it seemed an eternity to him. Despite Bartholomew's frantic efforts to draw the bear's attention, including striking it with a hiking pole, the grizzly focused on Donovan until the young man no longer moved. When the bear finally retreated toward the stream, Bartholomew rushed to his son's side, but the injuries were fatal. In shock and grief, The father activated his emergency satellite beacon and began the agonizing 3-mile hike to reach an area with cellular reception. Throughout this journey, he continuously looked over his shoulder, terrified that the bear might return. Upon reaching signal coverage, Bartholomew contacted park emergency services. Rangers responded with remarkable speed, reaching him within 40 minutes. A recovery team was immediately dispatched to the site with appropriate firearms for protection. They located Donovan's body and confirmed that his injuries were unsurvivable, documenting evidence that supported Bartholomew's account of the unprovoked defensive attack. The tragedy's aftermath rippled through the Thornton family and the wider community of the national park. Park officials temporarily closed the area where the attack occurred and initiated a search for the bear, ultimately identifying it through DNA evidence collected at the scene. Following established protocols for bears involved in fatal human encounters, the animal was humanely euthanized after being located. The incident prompted the park administration to thoroughly review and enhance its visitor education programs. More explicit warnings were added to backcountry permits, and additional mandatory safety briefings were implemented for all overnight wilderness users. Rangers began more aggressively enforcing minimum safe viewing distances for wildlife. Bartholomew Thornton returned to Minneapolis a changed man. In the months following his son's death, he established the Donovan Thornton Wildlife Safety Foundation, which partnered with national parks across North America to fund improved safety education materials and research into bear behavior and human-wildlife conflict prevention. Through advocacy, he transformed his tragedy into a mission to prevent similar incidents. The fatal Grizzly charge in that remote Montana valley served as a stark and sobering reminder of the raw power and unpredictability of wild animals, even in seemingly peaceful settings. What began as a routine wildlife sighting turned tragic in seconds, underscoring the importance of maintaining a safe and respectful distance, especially when predators feed or feel threatened. The incident reverberated far beyond the local community, making headlines and prompting national discussions about wildlife safety and human behavior in protected areas. Park rangers across the region began referencing the tragedy in safety briefings, using it as a powerful real-world example to drive home a critical point. No photograph, no social media post, and no close-up encounter is worth risking your life. Their message was clear: respect the boundaries of nature or face its consequences. Kodiak Island, Alaska's rugged coastline, had long been known for its spectacular beauty and for hosting the largest bears on Earth, the Kodiak brown bear. In 2008, this remote wilderness became the setting for a harrowing encounter demonstrating these massive predators' incredible power and unpredictability. Kodiak Island, separated from mainland Alaska by the Shelikof Strait, had been home to these giant bears for thousands of years, with the indigenous Alutiiq people coexisting with them through careful practices and deep respect. Percival Whitaker Montgomery, a commercial fisherman with 16 years of experience in Alaskan waters, had worked the fertile fishing grounds around Kodiak for the past 5 seasons. Montgomery was no stranger to bear country, having grown up in rural British Columbia, and he maintained appropriate precautions around his fishing cabin and boat. That late September afternoon, Montgomery performed routine maintenance on his 38-foot fishing vessel, the Northern Prospect, temporarily beached in a small isolated cove on the island's eastern shore. The area where Montgomery had anchored was relatively undeveloped, with thick alder thickets and spruce forest coming nearly to the water's edge. Prime bear habitat, particularly during salmon runs. Montgomery didn't realize that an unusually dry summer had resulted in poor berry production inland, pushing more bears toward coastal food sources. Additionally, the nearby stream had experienced a smaller-than-average salmon run, creating food stress among the local bear population. As Montgomery focused intently on replacing a damaged propeller shaft, he remained unaware of the massive Kodiak bear that had emerged silently from the dense brush approximately 40 yards away. The bear, a male later estimated to weigh over 1,200 pounds and have a shoulder height exceeding 4 feet, had likely been attracted by the lingering scent of fish and bait stored on Montgomery's boat. Wildlife biologists would later determine that this particular bear was approximately 12 years old, in his prime, but showing signs of nutritional stress from the challenging season. The bear's approach was remarkably stealthy for an animal of such size, a testament to the species' hunting adaptations. Montgomery's first indication of danger came only when loose stones shifted under the bear's weight, just 20 yards behind him. Montgomery turned to see the enormous brown bear accelerating toward him, moving slowly across the rocky beach. Having no time to reach the rifle secured in his boat cabin, Montgomery attempted to back toward deeper water, knowing bears sometimes hesitate to follow humans into water. However, before he could reach safety, the Kodiak closed the distance in 3 powerful bounds. The initial impact knocked Montgomery to the ground with tremendous force. The bear immediately bit down on his left forearm, which Montgomery had instinctively raised in self-defense. The pressure was immense. Kodiak bears possess bite forces exceeding 1,200 pounds per square inch and can crush bones with minimal effort. Montgomery reported later that the pain was unlike anything he had ever experienced, describing it as like having my arm caught in industrial machinery. In what would later be recognized as a remarkable presence of mind under extreme duress, Montgomery remembered the metal pipe he had used for leverage during his repairs. With his right hand, he grasped the 3-foot length of galvanized steel and struck the bear's sensitive nose with all his remaining strength. The unexpected pain caused the bear to momentarily release its grip and step back, giving Montgomery precious seconds to scramble backward. The Kodiak, however, was not easily deterred. It advanced again, this time swinging a massive paw that tore through Montgomery's heavy canvas work jacket and lacerated his chest. Montgomery continued striking at the bear's face with the pipe, focusing on its eyes and nose while shouting with as much volume as his injured body could produce. After what Montgomery later estimated as approximately 90 seconds of struggle, though emergency responders noted that such intense survival situations often feel much longer than they are, the bear finally backed away, huffing and growling before retreating into the forest. Severely wounded but conscious, Montgomery managed to drag himself to his boat's radio and issue a distress call. The U.S. Coast Guard responded promptly, dispatching a helicopter from their Kodiak station. Medical personnel found Montgomery suffering from a compound fracture to his left forearm, deep lacerations to his chest and shoulder, and significant blood loss. But remarkably, his injuries, while serious, were not immediately life-threatening. Montgomery provided detailed accounts to the Fish and Game officials during his 2-week hospitalization and subsequent 6 months of rehabilitation. Using his description, officials identified and monitored the bear responsible, but chose not to euthanize it, as the attack was deemed a natural response to Montgomery's unintentional intrusion rather than predatory behavior. The incident resulted in several important changes to safety protocols for fishermen operating in the Kodiak archipelago. The Fisheries Association developed enhanced guidelines for temporary beaching operations, including improved storage techniques for fish and bait, mandatory bear deterrence, and recommended communication procedures for solo operators. Montgomery eventually returned to commercial fishing, though he chose to work exclusively in the less bear-dense waters of southeastern Alaska. He retained full function of his injured arm after extensive physical therapy, though prominent scars remained as permanent reminders of his encounter. In presentations to fishing industry safety conferences, Montgomery frequently emphasized that his survival came down to 3 factors: keeping a useful tool within reach, targeting the bear's sensitive areas rather than its thick skull, and the fortunate circumstance that the bear was not desperately hungry enough to risk further injury for a meal. The remote wilderness of Karluk Lake on Kodiak Island had long been considered one of Alaska's most pristine and isolated locations. In 2012, this secluded region became the site of an unusual and frightening bear intrusion that highlighted the increasingly complex relationship between humans and wildlife in protected territories. Karluk Lake, the largest lake on Kodiak Island, had served as critical habitat for the island's famous Kodiak bears for centuries, with the area's rich salmon runs supporting some of the largest brown bears on Earth. Octavius Wellington Harrington, a seasoned wildlife officer with 14 years of service with the Department of Fish and Game, had been assigned to the isolated Karluk Lake Ranger Station for the summer monitoring season. The small, sturdy outpost, constructed in the 1970s as part of expanded conservation efforts, served as both accommodation and research base for officials tracking bear populations, salmon runs, and human activity in the protected watershed. Though reinforced against the harsh Alaskan elements, the station was not specifically designed to withstand determined bear intrusions. The incident occurred during a particularly challenging ecological period. Unusually warm temperatures had accelerated snowmelt, disrupting normal salmon migration patterns and causing ripple effects throughout the local food web. Wildlife biologists had observed increased bear movement throughout the region as the animals searched more widely for sufficient nutrition. Additionally, the previous winter had seen higher than average bear cub survival rates, increasing competition for available food sources. Harrington had been stationed at Karluk for approximately 6 weeks when he departed for a 3-day backcountry patrol, securing the station according to standard protocols before leaving. Upon his return, hiking the final ridge before the station came into view, he immediately noticed something amiss. The main door hung awkwardly from a single hinge, and equipment normally stored under the covered porch had been scattered across the surrounding clearing. Approaching cautiously, Harrington observed clear evidence of a substantial bear intrusion. Massive paw prints in the soft ground indicated an exceptionally large Kodiak had forced entry into the station. Later measurement of the tracks suggested a bear weighing approximately 1,100 pounds, among the largest recorded in recent surveys. Realizing that the station's food cache had been completely compromised was more concerning than the exterior damage. The secure metal storage containers had been torn open with remarkable force, and approximately 6 weeks' worth of provisions had been either consumed or contaminated. What happened next would later be described in official reports as an unprecedented escalation of human-wildlife conflict. As Harrington cautiously entered the damaged station to assess the interior damage, a distinctive huffing sound from the small back storage room revealed the intruder had not departed. The enormous Kodiak bear, having found the shelter comfortable after its feeding frenzy, had settled in among the torn supplies and equipment. The bear stood to its full height, over 9 feet tall on its hind legs, and issued deep, rumbling growls that resonated throughout the small structure. Drawing on years of wildlife management training, Harrington slowly backed toward the damaged doorway while maintaining eye contact with the agitated animal. The bear advanced from the storage room into the main living area, effectively cutting off direct access to the exit. Displaying remarkable calm under extreme pressure, Harrington sidestepped toward the small communications alcove while keeping maximum distance between himself and the bear. As the massive animal took another step forward, Harrington slipped through the side door that led to a small equipment shed attached to the main structure. He closed the door behind him and engaged the single steel bolt lock in one fluid motion. From the relative safety of the shed, Harrington used the emergency satellite radio to contact the regional headquarters in Kodiak City. He reported his situation with remarkable precision, noting the bear's size, behavior patterns, and the extent of the station damage. For the next 4 hours and 17 minutes, Harrington remained trapped in the unheated shed, while the bear periodically scratched and pushed at the connecting door, apparently aware of his presence. The Fish and Game authorities dispatched a response team via helicopter, arriving shortly before dusk. The team encouraged the bear to leave the station without harming the animal or personnel using established bear deterrent protocols, including specialized noise devices and non-lethal rubber projectiles. Once the bear retreated into the surrounding forest, the team secured the area and evacuated Harrington. Subsequent investigation revealed the extent of the bear's activities. The animal had consumed or destroyed approximately 340 pounds of food supplies, damaged sensitive research equipment valued at over $18,000, and rendered the station temporarily uninhabitable. Analysis of hair samples collected from the site identified the bear as a known 12-year-old male, previously tagged as part of ongoing population studies. The bear's systematic destruction of the station facilities demonstrated an unsettling level of intelligence and persistence. It had methodically explored every storage container, testing different approaches until finding one that yielded access. Most concerning to wildlife officials was the discovery that the bear had initially attempted to open the reinforced food locker, using techniques that suggested previous success with human food storage systems. Claw marks on the door handles showed deliberate manipulation rather than random damage, indicating that this particular bear had likely had previous rewarded encounters with human structures. The psychological impact on Harrington was significant, though not in the way many might expect. Rather than developing fear or resentment toward the species he had dedicated his career to protecting, he developed a deeper appreciation for the cognitive abilities of these massive predators. During his debriefing with senior wildlife officials, Harrington emphasized that the bear had not displayed predatory behavior toward him specifically. It had primarily been interested in the food supplies and comfortable shelter. This observation would later inform important distinctions in management protocols between bears that seek human food and those that pose direct threats to human safety. The incident prompted a comprehensive review of remote station security throughout Alaska's protected wilderness areas. New design specifications included reinforced entry points, bear-resistant architectural elements, and improved food storage systems. The Karluk Lake Station was rebuilt the following spring with these enhanced security features, including specialized steel mesh reinforcement in walls and dedicated secure food storage separate from the main structure. The reconstruction process itself posed unique challenges. Materials had to be airlifted to the remote location, with construction crews working under constant wildlife monitoring protocols. During the rebuilding, 2 dedicated wildlife officers remained on site to maintain bear deterrent measures and ensure worker safety. The new station incorporated lessons from bear behavior specialists across North America, resulting in what many considered the continent's most bear-resistant research facility. Key innovations included inward-opening doors that couldn't be pried outward by claws, specialized reinforced window frames that prevented the expansion of small openings, and an innovative alarm system that detected unusual pressure against exterior walls. Perhaps most significant was the complete redesign of the station's food storage approach. Rather than relying solely on reinforced containers inside the structure, the new design featured a separate, specialized food storage bunker connected to the main building by a short, secured corridor. This bunker utilized advanced technology, including temperature-controlled storage and olfactory barriers that reduced food scent dispersion, a key attractant for wildlife with acute smell sensitivity. These measures represented a significant evolution in human-wildlife conflict management, moving beyond physical barriers to address the sensory factors that often drove bear behavior. Harrington continued his career with the Fish and Game authorities, eventually becoming a lead trainer for new wildlife officers in bear safety protocols. He frequently incorporated his Karluk Lake experience into training scenarios, emphasizing that facility design often underestimated bears' problem-solving abilities and physical strength. His calm handling of the dangerous situation earned him a departmental commendation for exemplary field response under life-threatening conditions. The Karluk Lake incident became a case study in wildlife management courses, illustrating how changing environmental conditions could alter established behavior patterns and increase the likelihood of dangerous human-wildlife interactions. After the incident, the bear, equipped with a tracking collar, was monitored for the remainder of its life. It never again attempted to enter human structures, suggesting that the encounter may have been driven by exceptional circumstances rather than habitual behavior. The fertile agricultural valley outside Fraser Lake in central British Columbia had long been known for its abundant crops and spectacular mountain vistas. In 2016, this peaceful farming community became the setting for an unusual and frightening bear encounter, demonstrating how changing environmental patterns brought wildlife and humans into increasingly frequent contact. Approximately 160 kilometers west of Prince George's, the region had historically maintained a respectful distance between its farming operations and surrounding wilderness areas. Maximilian Thaddeus Blackburn, a third-generation farmer specializing in organic berry production, had expanded his family's traditional operations to include 20 acres of Saskatoon berries, haskaps, and raspberries. The farm, nestled in the transitional zone between agricultural land and forest, had previously experienced occasional wildlife visitors, primarily deer and smaller mammals, but larger predators had generally maintained their distance from human activity. The unusually warm and dry summer of 2016 significantly impacted wild and cultivated food sources throughout British Columbia. Forest ecologists later confirmed that natural berry production in the wilderness areas surrounding Fraser Lake had decreased by approximately 60% compared to average years. Additionally, lightning-triggered forest fires in nearby mountainous regions displaced wildlife from their traditional territories, forcing animals to range farther in search of food. Blackburn had noticed unusual tracks and scat on the perimeter of his fields for approximately 2 weeks before the encounter, but had attributed them to black bears. which occasionally ventured near farms during years of food scarcity. He had implemented standard precautions, including securing garbage and compost facilities, but had not yet installed electric fencing around his berry fields, as the harvest season was nearing completion. On the evening in question, Blackburn completed final equipment checks on his berry harvester, preparing for the next morning's work. The sun was low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the rows of berry bushes heavy with late-season fruit. As he finished adjusting the harvester's collection belts and climbed down from the machine, Blackburn spotted movement approximately 30 yards away, where his raspberry fields met a small wooded area. What emerged from the tree line stunned him. Not the black bear he had anticipated, but a full-sized grizzly bear, estimated later by wildlife officials to weigh approximately 650 pounds. The animal moved directly toward the richest section of raspberries, apparently having discovered this abundant food source on previous visits. Conservation officers later determined that this bear, a male approximately 7 years old, had traveled over 20 miles from its normal range, likely driven by hunger after the failure of natural food sources. Blackburn, momentarily frozen by the unexpected sight of a grizzly so deep into agricultural territory, quickly assessed his situation. He was approximately 15 yards from his tractor, which offered the only substantial protection in the open field. As the bear began systematically consuming large quantities of berries, seemingly oblivious to the human presence, Blackburn began slowly moving backward toward the tractor, careful not to make sudden movements that might trigger the bear's attention. He had nearly reached the tractor when he accidentally stepped on a fallen branch, creating a sharp cracking sound that immediately caught the grizzly's attention. The bear's head snapped up, berry juice staining its muzzle, and it fixed its gaze directly on Blackburn. Without hesitation, the grizzly charged, covering the distance between them with alarming speed. Blackburn scrambled onto the tractor, pulling himself into the operator's cab mere seconds before the bear reached the vehicle. The grizzly rose on its hind legs, placing its massive paws against the tractor's side and peering into the cab with evident agitation. Blackburn, heart pounding but mind remarkably clear, pressed the tractor's horn repeatedly, creating a sustained, loud noise that temporarily confused the animal. For nearly 20 minutes, an unusual standoff ensued. The grizzly circled the tractor multiple times, occasionally standing to its full height and striking the metal exterior with powerful blows that left visible dents in the equipment. Blackburn continued sounding the horn at intervals while using his cell phone to contact the conservation officer service. Throughout the ordeal, the bear displayed no fear of the machinery or the noise, behavior that concerned wildlife officials monitoring similar incidents throughout the province. Eventually, the bear's interest in the immediately accessible berries outweighed its curiosity about the tractor and occupant. It returned to feeding approximately 50 yards away, though it remained visibly aware of Blackburn's presence, frequently looking up from its feast to monitor the tractor. When conservation officers arrived approximately 45 minutes later, the bear retreated to the tree line, but did not fully depart the area. The incident catalyzed significant changes throughout the Fraser Lake agricultural community. The following week, a regional meeting brought together farmers, conservation officers, and wildlife biologists to develop comprehensive strategies for managing the increasing wildlife conflicts. With provincial government support, a subsidized electric fencing program was implemented for berry producers and other high-risk agricultural operations. Blackburn recognized both the danger and the ecological pressures that had brought the grizzly to his farm and became an advocate for coexistence strategies rather than lethal management. He worked with conservation authorities to implement a model system on his property, including proper food storage, waste management, and strategic fencing that protected critical crops while allowing wildlife corridors through less productive areas. The grizzly that had entered Blackburn's farm was fitted with a GPS tracking collar and relocated approximately 70 miles north to an area with abundant natural food sources. Monitoring data collected over the following 3 years showed that the bear did not return to agricultural regions, successfully reintegrating into its natural feeding patterns once food pressure diminished. This uncommon encounter between a farmer and a grizzly became a case study in wildlife management courses at a university in northern British Columbia, highlighting how climate change and habitat pressures redraw traditional boundaries between human activity and wildlife territories. Blackburn's experience demonstrated that with proper management protocols and understanding of bear behavior, Even potentially deadly confrontations could be resolved without harming humans or these essential apex predators. It also sparked broader discussions about coexistence strategies in rapidly changing ecosystems. Students and professionals began rethinking conservation models to prioritize adaptability, real-time data, and community engagement. Blackburn's story was a rare success and a blueprint for future responses. It reminded everyone that respect, preparation, and clear protocols could bridge the growing gap between people and wild animals. These lessons are becoming more urgent and valuable in a world where such encounters increase.